And this is Bloomberg Technology from New York. Coming up, unfriending Facebook. Privacy concerns on the social media site are taking a toll, with users deleting profiles at an alarming rate. Plus, Bitcoin back on the move. As a price spike shoots the cryptocurrency up by more than $1,000 in less than an hour, we will chart the rise and the reasons behind it. And an early look into what could be the future of fintech. Betterment CEO John Stein joins us with perspective on robots taking advisory roles, managing wealth. But first, to our lead. Concerns about Facebook's privacy is taking a toll. A research group called TechPinions conducted a survey to find out just how serious Americans are taking it. The findings: nearly 1 in 10 Americans have deleted their Facebook account on privacy concerns, while 17% have deleted the app from their phone. And about 35% say they are using Facebook less than they used to. Co-founder Mark Zuckerberg testified on Capitol Hill for 10 hours over 2 days over the most recent crisis surrounding Cambridge Analytica, as well as Russian election meddling. Joining us now from Vancouver, Elevation Partners Managing Director Roger McNamee. Here with me in New York, Bloomberg Tech Sarah Fryer, who just flew in from D.C. Sarah, I want to start with you because I want to know the latest. What are lawmakers doing now? What is Facebook doing now?
So all of those times during the 10 hours of testimony that Zuckerberg says, I'll have my team follow up with you on that, now that's happening. So the congressmen are giving their questions to Facebook staff. Facebook staff has to go through and meticulously answer them all. And then we'll get some really interesting answers that take a little longer than the 5 seconds Zuckerberg had to respond in many cases.
And look, he said, I'll have my team follow up with you many, many, many times. Roger, I'm sure you were listening in. How satisfied were you with what you heard from Mark Zuckerberg, and how satisfied were you with the questions from lawmakers?
I would give both mixed results for reasons that I think are obvious about the structure of the hearings themselves. I mean, think about it. During the Senate hearing, in the first hour and a half, there were at least a dozen different issues that senators raised, areas of really serious concern. And that helped Mark respond because he didn't have to worry about prosecutorial technique being applied at him, just hammering him on the same issue over and over. He was able to say, I'll get back to you, and then move on to the next topic. The problem with that, and this is where I think he's got a real issue here, is that, you know, Facebook may be like a rock, but this scandal is like water pouring over it. It's going to erode the rock. And the trust of Facebook, I think, is in severe jeopardy right now. And Mark and Sheryl have no one to blame but themselves. They've handled this thing in a cavalier fashion, and it's really serious. I mean, we're talking about democracy. We're talking about civil liberties. We're talking about the rights of human beings in places like Myanmar and the Philippines. And so, you know, they have to be more focused.
That said, Mark Zuckerberg told us that it hasn't had a meaningful impact on usage. Sheryl Sandberg told me that, and Sarah Fryer, that only a few advertisers have paused their spending. And then we have this TechPinions survey. How do we make sense of that?
So I don't know about the TechPinions survey because it's really easy to say you've deleted the app, whether you have or haven't. I will be stunned if we don't see a change in usage both in the March and June quarters because of this in North America and Western Europe. And I just think that the erosion of trust is so staggering at this point that from Facebook's point of view, they, you know, it goes after just what the business really is. And I think they've forgotten that they don't have a birthright here. They require consumers' willingness to work with them. And Mark's responses to a lot of those questions, particularly Senator Durbin's question about his hotel room, you know, would he divulge where he had stayed? And then Representative Eshu's comments about, you know, the business model and the inherent invasions of privacy. Those things are a tell. And they give consumers a sense, wait a minute, these people view us as fodder. They view us as fuel for their profits. They don't view us as customers or even human beings.
Now, there was another issue that came up several times, specifically in the House hearings, where the questions were rightfully and luckily more pointed and better informed, I believe, than the Senate hearing. Representative Kathy Castor asked this of Mark Zuckerberg about what happens and how does Facebook track users off Facebook, including users who've never signed up for Facebook in the first place. Take a listen to that exchange.
You are collecting personal information on people who do not even have Facebook accounts. Isn't that right?
Congresswoman, I believe that
yes or no?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure that I don't think that that's what we're tracking.
No, you're collecting, you have already acknowledged that you are doing that for security purposes and commercial purposes. So you're collecting data outside of Facebook. When someone goes to a website and it has the Facebook like or share, that data is being collected by Facebook, correct?
Congresswoman,
yes or no?
That's right, that we understand in order to show which of your friends.
Yeah, so for people that
like
don't even
page.
have Facebook, I don't think that the average American really understands that.
Roger, is it true that several other internet companies do similar things like Google? And if so, what's so bad about this?
So I think there are a million things that are wrong with it. Yes, lots of internet companies do it. I use a product called Ghostery on my phone and on my computer to block trackers exactly like this, and it's simply frightening. For any given page I land on, there will be between half a dozen and say 15 different trackers that people have attempted to insert into my browser as I'm searching around the web. And in my mind, the whole thing is a massive invasion of privacy predicated on a lie, on this notion that none of this is really going on. And I think as consumers begin to understand the degree to which they are being used as fuel for business models that they have no real benefit from, I think that's, again, the trust erodes a lot further, and it goes way beyond Facebook, as you pointed out. I think Facebook is in the crosshairs because its impact on elections is so great. But in reality, in everyday life, Google has a profound impact, and things like Instagram and Snapchat and especially YouTube have just an unbelievable impact on society and on, mental health.
But Roger, I think one of the reasons that people are really upset with Facebook in particular is because Facebook is going out there and saying, you're in control of your data. We built this for you. You own basically everything you do on this platform. It's all about you. And this questioning from Castor really cut at that point from Zuckerberg. It's not your choice to share your data if Facebook is even tracking information on people who don't even have accounts. So I think that exactly.
I think you're exactly correct. You're exactly correct. And I think Representative Castor, that was the opposite of grandstanding. What that was brilliantly well-informed questions from a legislator charged with protecting the public interest. And we all owe her a massive note of thanks because she and literally a couple dozen other members of Congress did us a public service. They exposed a lot of the nonsense that's going on. And, Representative Sarbanes asked really important questions, and, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Klobuchar. I mean, it was a really long list of really fine, Senator Kennedy. And, when I look at this, the problem here is that we were asleep. We love the products. We love the convenience. We love the fun. We love the kitten photos. But at the end of the day, in order to monetize that, these companies got involved in surveillance. And the surveillance they did is every bit as intrusive as what a spy agency would do. And the difference is that they're not doing it for the national interest. They're doing it for their profits.
Roger, hang on. You're going to stay with us, Sarah. I have to let you go. But before you go, you're following up on some things in the hearing that were surprising. Things like Cambridge University and what Zuckerberg had to say about that Facebook is investigating more broadly whether something bad is happening there. What else are we, the Bloomberg News team, looking into?
I think one of the very important points in the testimony was that AI is going to solve everything. All of these questions about whether Facebook is treating its content the right way, whether there are biases, whether they're taking down hateful content fast enough, they offered AI as a solution to all of that. And AI is trained by humans that have the same biases as any of us. And it's not going to end well.
I want to ask Roger about that after this quick break. Sarah Fryer, thanks so much for stopping by. Great work this week covering these hearings. Thank you so much, Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook for Bloomberg News. Coming up, would you pay for Facebook? We will discuss the possibility of a subscription-based model. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Yes, there will always be a version of Facebook that is free. It is our mission to try to help connect everyone around the world and to bring the world closer together. In order to do that, we believe that we need to offer a service that everyone can afford, and we're committed to doing that.
That was Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg testifying to U.S. senators Tuesday, clarifying that there will always be a free version of Facebook. So does that mean there will be a paid version of Facebook someday? Still with me, Elevation Partners Managing Director Roger McNamee. Roger, you have been out there advocating for Facebook to have a subscription-based model. On one hand, you have Mark Zuckerberg saying that. On the other hand, Sheryl Sandberg told me that the business model is not going to change, and this business model leverages the information that we share with Facebook to target ads to us in order to deliver a free version of Facebook. How realistic do you think a subscription model is at this point?
You know, I don't honestly know. I have been baffled, Emily, by the way that Mark and Sheryl are looking at this problem. They seem to think that only their perspective matters in this, that there is no national interest, that there are no interests of other companies that should somehow come before their own. And as I look at it, the beautiful thing about Facebook is because it is a giant network, their ability to implement a subscription service at low cost is really easy. In fact, they have an opportunity to be the Comcast of cord cutters. I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post a month or two ago on this very topic, that they could be the hub for everybody's media.
How many people would actually pay for it? And would it be substantial enough?
We don't know, but I also don't think that's really the concern. Why is the national concern making sure that Facebook's profits keep rising? I think the problem we have here is if the 2018 elections are somehow manipulated or interfered with the same way 2016 was, I think you have to ask the question of why Facebook. Right?
So that,
I mean,
Roger, that actually is
why
my
is
next
this
question.
not a national security issue? Why is it not a national security issue?
So, you know, Mark Zuckerberg said many times they're working on, AI, several tools to prevent what happened in 2016 from happening at the midterms this year. How convinced are you that it won't happen again?
I'm not convinced at all. They haven't given us any reason to be confident. They did one thing last week, which I'm proud of them, and I'm really happy they did it, which is they committed to implementing a version of the Honest Ads Act that includes both campaign ads and issue ads that requires explicit identity for the whoever pays and sponsors the advertisement, and it requires true identity. That's really valuable. It only addresses a small part of the problem, but that's the first time since the 2016 election that they've done anything that might actually prevent or reduce the level of interference in 2018. So I look at this and go, hey guys, for 14 years you've been moving fast, breaking things, apologizing, and then moving forward as though nothing has happened. We're done with that. Now we're at the point where we've got to see substantive change, and if we don't, the regulators are going to have to, step in here in a big way. If I were Facebook, I would embrace the global data protection regulation that's going online in Europe on May 25th. I would embrace it because that's a very good starting point for individual privacy. But on the national security thing, I don't think they're even remotely prepared to do this. The first thing they have to do is they cannot have employees embedded in campaigns anymore. That was so asymmetric in 2016. It just can't be allowed again. And I think, candidly, they're going to have to pull themselves out of election politics the best way they can, because at the moment, they provide a really substantial advantage to anyone who runs a really inflammatory campaign. Because Facebook engagement is driven by fear and anger, things that appeal to fear and anger have a giant advantage in terms of reach. In Trump's case, 17 times as much reach per dollar spent because of the nature of the message he was putting out there.
Roger, there is a chance that Facebook and we are only scratching the surface right now. What are the chances that there are many more Cambridge Analytica type situations out there?
Well, I mean, we're going to find out. What I can tell you is I'm already aware of a number of things that happened in 2016 that are not generally understood. You know, the role that the Facebook employees inside the Trump campaign played, you know, the evidence is mounting that they played a huge role in the success of the Trump campaign. Taking the data that Cambridge Analytica had misappropriated, working side by side with the Cambridge Analytica people on behalf of the Trump campaign, a mere 6 months after there'd been this huge furor over Cambridge Analytica misappropriating the data and in theory destroying it on Facebook's insistence. But 6 months later, Facebook was totally happy to be working with them with the same data. I mean, Zuck's going to have to work really hard to convince anyone that they did not know that that was going on. I mean, it was so public. And I suspect we're going to find that in that 4-year period when applications could harvest friend list, that more or less everyone in the United States was harvested dozens of times, and that data is out there, and we have no idea who's using it and for what, and there's no way for Facebook to find out at this point because the stuff has escaped.
Roger McNamee of Elevation Partners. As always, Roger, great to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Emily, you're the best.
You are the best. Joining us from Vancouver, Roger, thank you. Well, the HomePod hasn't turned out to be the next big thing for Apple. The smart speaker went on sale in January, entering a market dominated by Amazon's lineup of Alexa-powered devices. According to people familiar with the matter, Apple has now lowered sales forecasts for the HomePod, and it's reduced orders with a subcontractor that builds it. Coming up, can we call it a comeback? Bitcoin surges the most since its December highs. We'll discuss next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Bitcoin surged more today than it has in a single day since December. The biggest cryptocurrency climbed as much as 16.9%, closing in on $8,000. Here to talk more about the jump, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde, live from London. Caroline, tell us more about what's behind this specific sudden surge.
I know, sudden surge being 12% pop at one point. It's the biggest move that we've seen since December. So at last, relief for many of those long this particular market after what have been about a 4-month bear market. And I think there's a few reasons that are driving this. We've been talking about for the last few days and weeks how perhaps the fact that we're coming to the end of the tax year, that in the US is going to be April the 17th, that could be driving a lot of selling pressure at the moment, because perhaps to pay your tax after the sudden surges we saw in 2017, you're actually having to liquidate some of your Bitcoin and Ether. So that's coming to an end. That's one particular reason that perhaps we're starting to see some appetite for Bitcoin once again. We've also heard Santander is rolling out a blockchain-based money transfer app. This is actually backed by Ripple. That's showing that institutions are getting in on blockchain technology. That's a benefit for the industry as a whole. And look, shorts are getting squeezed out. If you've been putting on some bets against Bitcoin and suddenly you see these big moves, at one point we saw Bitcoin move by $1,000 in under 30 minutes. You suddenly get squeezed out of the system. You have to take off those short bets. So that could be another key driving force. All of these have been what's been voiced by Thomas Lee. He's at Fundstrat. He's a well-known bull when it comes to Bitcoin. But the mood music is there. We've been talking about Soros getting in, his fund getting into the trading of cryptocurrencies, and Pantera, another hedge fund today, coming out saying, look, $6,500, that's in the past. We could see 20,000 back again for Bitcoin.
So beyond Bitcoin, other things are moving. You know, what else did you see happening in the crypto markets today?
Yeah, you name it, and they rose. We got Bitcoin Cash, of course, which fought from Bitcoin. That was on the up, Emily. We saw Litecoin go higher, Ether go higher. You've seen Ripple on the up, the Ripple coin being XRP. So overall, this was an all boats rise kind of story.
Talk to us about what Barclays is saying, because, you know, they're saying that Bitcoin has peaked when obviously there's a lot of optimism out there from others. What's their reasoning?
This really caught my eye. Why? Because they are using a way of strategizing Bitcoin by using cancer as a way of really trying to visualize it. It really struck me. I mean, the headline was quite phenomenal on the Bloomberg terminal. It really was that Barclays says the rise of Bitcoin is similar to the spread of infectious diseases. Overall, what they're showing is that, like cancer, you have groups who are susceptible, you have groups who are infected, you have groups who are immune, and they're saying more are becoming immune now. The amount of people out there who've now heard of cryptocurrencies, who have heard of Bitcoin, that's hit peak. They say basically it's universally known now. But that means that there are fewer and fewer people out there to be convinced and to buy. So in their note, this is Joseph Abbott, who leads the analyst there, says, we believe really they're at the end of the high. They say we believe the speculative froth phase is over and perhaps peak prices are now behind us. But I really did show you that chart. We've got to go back to the GTV chart showing you that actually while Barclays is saying, well, the best is behind us, well, technicals are showing that perhaps the time to buy is now. We saw Bitcoin trade just above that yellow line there, which is the 200 moving day average. That is a technical indicator that we could see the prices push higher, Emily.
All right, Caroline Hyde live for us in London. Caroline, thanks so much for that breakdown. Coming up, after the hearings in Washington this week, members of Congress are pushing forward bills regulating online ads and protecting digital privacy. We will discuss the regulatory risks ahead for Facebook. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. The Facebook hearings on Capitol Hill this week signaled the era of self-regulation for social media is likely over, and specific calls for more oversight over Facebook is growing. Earlier today on Bloomberg Television, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, who runs the city's pension fund, which is a big shareholder in Facebook, pushed to break up the power within the social network. Take a listen.
Separate CEO and chair, add more independent directors, have more transparency, and then let's get to the root of what's happening here. Our democracy is at stake, and one of the biggest companies in the world that we invest in is also at stake.
I want to bring in Rob Atkinson, president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, a Washington-based think tank. Rob, so there you see one shareholder saying we should separate the CEO and chair position. Mark Zuckerberg holds both positions, and he has more power than almost any CEO ever has had within a company. Do you think that's going far enough, or is that going too far?
Well, look, I can't comment on management issues in any particular company. What I can comment on is the sort of hysteria that has gripped Washington, if not beyond that, over this issue. And we should all just take a very deep breath and calm down. Particularly troubling, you had a prior speaker, Roger McNamee, who proposed that somehow we should adopt European-style privacy rules in the U.S. because of a violation, by the way, of a European company who's already subject to European privacy rules. I think this kind of talk is incredibly risky. We've done an analysis at ITIF of the impact of what's called the GDPR, the General Data Privacy Regulation, and it would be very, very detrimental to the U.S. digital economy, very detrimental. And so I think we just all take a deep breath. Facebook is, the other thing I would add here, Facebook has gotten in trouble because it shared data with an academic researcher who then violated the terms of service. What people have forgotten about is Facebook had a very, very well-run and well-regarded program that academic researchers around the world, particularly in the U.S., have found incredibly valuable to find new insights. For example, they've used that research to better predict when women who are about to have a baby and then have a baby, who's most likely to be at risk of postpartum depression. There's a lot of really amazing research that's been done in a completely privacy protective way that Facebook has engaged in. And somehow we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I fear.
Hang on, Rob, because first of all, I want to know why you think this could be so damaging. And second of all, Mark Zuckerberg himself said he thinks GDPR is good and is going to apply it as a standard at Facebook around the world, despite the fact that there aren't laws here, mandating it.
Look, I can't speak for Mr. Zuckerberg.
Well, that's what he said.
Well, no, exactly. I don't know. I can't speak for why he would say it. All I can show and demonstrate is there's very clear evidence. The prior law to GDPR, which was much less onerous than what GDPR is, Catherine Tucker, who's a researcher at MIT, did a study comparing the European privacy regime to the U.S. And what her research found was that the ad effectiveness in Europe, so if you want to put an ad up on any kind of website, social media in Europe, it's up to 60% less effective. So in other words, 60% less money that you can monetize a user in Europe because of the restrictive privacy rules. So are we really saying we want all these internet companies to have 60% less money? Because that means 60% less new features, less innovation. And GDPR, by the way, the big area you mentioned earlier about AI, we released a report at ITIF 2 weeks ago on just looking at exactly the provisions in that 200-page bill and how it's going to negatively affect AI. If Europe stays with the GDPR, we can pretty much rest assured that they will be a backwater when it comes to artificial intelligence, because the legislation makes it almost impossible to use data for machine learning and analytics in Europe.
Now, yes or no, do you believe current laws are working?
I do believe current laws are working.
Okay.
You have to remember here, who violated the law here? It wasn't Facebook. It wasn't Facebook.
Okay,
it was
so you believe current laws are working.
Cambridge Analytica.
And yet 87 million people may have had their data mishandled. 2 billion people, all of Facebook users, potentially had their data, their public data scraped. And our elections were meddled in by a state actor, and we'll never know if they swayed the outcome or not. How can you say that our current laws are working?
Well, let me be precise. Our current laws with regard to privacy are working. The political interference issue, I think, is a little different, and there's where either some kind of new law or some kind of corporate agreement on practices, I think, are important. But on the privacy side, the current laws are working. What happened? That researcher in England violated the law. Cambridge Analytica violated the law. What are we going to do? Put in Sharia law and say we're going to cut your hand off if you do this? Those things are already against the law. They violated the law. Privacy regulation would not have changed this outcome one iota.
Well, but the Cambridge Analytica situation has exactly to do with privacy. Information was taken and mishandled, and that information could have been used to target people to meddle in the U.S. election.
Of course, and Cambridge Analytica broke the law. So we have a law. They broke the law. And why would an additional law that's more stringent make any difference? We have laws in the U.S. against driving too fast, but people drive too fast. So there are going to be scoff laws like Cambridge Analytica and that researcher at university who don't obey the rules and the laws, and having better and stronger laws aren't going to make any difference to that. The really important point to remember here also is, by the way, that data was used in a sort of machine-readable forms. It's not fundamentally clear that any individual was harmed. What Cambridge Analytica did was wrong. Well, but what we have to remember is when Zuckerberg talked about how they use data, they just have data. They match it with an algorithm to an ad. The ad then gets placed and it says, hey, Rob Atkinson, you ride your bike to work, so I'm going to give you a bike ad. That doesn't violate my privacy.
So, look, there's an argument to be made that third-party developers shouldn't have access to the information of friends on Facebook. But we'll leave it there. Rob Atkinson, Information Technology and Innovation Foundation President, thank you. Well, Uber's 2016 data breach exposed the names, phone numbers, and email addresses of more than 20 million users of the ride-hailing service. This, according to the FTC. In a statement, the acting FTC chair said the agency expanded its settlement with the company and said the new agreement was designed to ensure that Uber does not engage in similar misconduct in the future. Coming up, Betterment is offering wealth management to the masses with its robo-advisors. We'll hear from the CEO next. This is Bloomberg. Tesla is taking the unusual step of withdrawing from a federal investigation of a fatal crash involving one of its vehicles. The electric car maker says the National Transportation Safety Board won't allow it to release information on its driver assistance program, Autopilot, which was used in the crash. Tesla was criticized for blaming this crash on the driver. Well, operating in the heart of the financial capital of the world, New York-based Betterment is looking to disrupt the finance industry, going after high net worth clients with robo-advising. So, will cutting-edge tech and low fees help usher more clientele to the startup? I want to bring in John Stein, CEO of Betterment, here with me in New York. So, first of all, you provide financial advice with as little human intervention as possible. And I'm curious, how much progress has AI made in just the last year to improve what you do?
We have always used technology to reduce costs, to help people reduce their taxes, to give them full holistic financial planning. And it takes a lot of data and processing of that data to deliver financial advice. We also use it on the customer servicing side to help give them more delightful experiences and route them intelligently. But AI, in terms of what it's actually doing to better manage your money, is still in the early stages. And I think that's true in most financial services companies who are just beginning to start to see the power of that technology.
So what does that mean? Like, what can't you do now that you might be able to do in 2 years?
Well, if you believe that in a few years we'll have self-driving cars, as I do, of course you believe that we'll have self-managing wallets. And I can't imagine that in 10 years people are still going to be managing their balances between their checking account and their savings account.
God, that is so
How
annoying.
much should be in stocks and bonds, right? All of that can be better done by technology than it can be done by humans. And it's much less annoying if you don't have to do it yourself.
That said, there are larger incumbents getting into your business, and does this become a commodity?
One of the things that's really exciting for us is that incumbents are coming in, and I think they're driving attention to the space and driving customers to us, because all of these incumbents are conflicted. All of them are selling their own products. And if you go to Vanguard, of course you expect you're going to get Vanguard funds, but if you go to Schwab, you're getting Schwab funds. If you go to Merrill Lynch, you're getting funds that they're getting paid to offer you. If you come to Betterment, we don't get paid by anyone. We don't get paid to sell you certain funds. The only way we make money is the fee that you pay us to advise you. So we're a fiduciary advisor, and that makes us unique in the robo-advisor space. We're the only one who's always looking out for our customers' best interests.
Do you have any plans to expand, though? Because some of your competitors are, for example, partnering with banks to offer things like checking accounts and credit cards. Is that something that you would do?
What I'm excited about is how do we help customers make the most of their money. We've always tried to make more of your money. So I don't want to give you just a checking account. I want to give you something better. I want to make your checking account smarter and help you make more money off everything that you own. That's what we do. So you won't see us launch just a checking account or just a debit card like all these other players are doing. You'll see us do things that help you make more money.
How many assets do you have under management today?
$13.5 billion for 350,000.
So how fast do you expect that to grow?
We grew 120% year over year, Q1 this year to Q1 last year. I expect that kind of growth to continue.
How are you advising on tech? Given, A, lots of market volatility, B, lots of uncertainty around what happens with Facebook.
I think it's really interesting what's going on with Facebook and in the broader sense of wanting to regulate these big tech companies, right? And I share, as a consumer of these companies, I want that regulation as well. And when we get asked that question, I like to remind people that we have always been highly regulated. Part of the reason I got into this business is because regulation had stifled innovation for a long time, and I saw there was a need to break through. Now, we're regulated by the SEC and by FINRA as an investment advisor and a broker-dealer. And that
Does that same regulation need to apply to tech?
I think regulation needs to apply to every industry. I think over time, like most of the tech industry is doing brand new things, and you need new thoughts and new regulations to help protect consumers.
And has what's happened with Facebook impacted how you think about the user data, the very sensitive user data that you have?
Well, because we're so highly regulated, we've always had to think very carefully about data. We don't store anything that's too sensitive. But your data is so important to giving you a full financial plan. If you think about the traditional advisor relationship, you'd bring a shoebox full of receipts and papers and stuff like that and hand it over to your advisor to help them make a plan. We've automated much of that process and made it painless and digital and seamless. But we have to take great care with that financial data to make sure that it's always used in your best interest. We never sell your data. We never rent it to anyone else. No one else has access to it. And we don't use any proprietary passwords. So if you have your Betterment data shared elsewhere, you have app-specific passwords that no one else can use your data.
All right. CEO of Betterment, John Stein. Fascinating stuff. We'll check in with you in a couple of years.
Thank you.
If not sooner. Okay, coming up. A WeWork type of space, but specifically designed for women. We'll speak to one founder who's swapping out the kegs for nursing rooms. That's next. This is Bloomberg. There are 20 cities shortlisted by Amazon for its second North American headquarters, and at least one real estate fund is trying to score a payday if the e-commerce giant picks the Washington, D.C. area. Third Avenue Real Estate Value Fund, which manages a little less than $2 billion, owns $10 million worth of shares in JBG Smith Properties, a real estate investment trust based in Arlington, Virginia. Third Avenue predicts shares will be worth more than $40 apiece if Amazon picks Arlington's Crystal City neighborhood, where JBG has significant holdings, according to a person with knowledge of their thinking. Well, WeWork is buying a Chinese co-working startup called Naked Hub for $400 million as part of its global expansion plans. The news adds to WeWork's advantages in co-working spaces, armed with $4.75 billion in funding and more than 200 buildings worldwide. But now one Seattle-based startup is seeking to create a WeWork type of space specifically designed for women. With a newly announced $4.75 million investment led by Madrona Venture Group, the Riveter offers a mother's room and a yoga studio along with monthly potlucks. Joining us now, co-founder of the Riveter, Amy Nelson. So WeWork seems to have a good formula. What makes you think that you can disrupt that?
I think we can disrupt it because we need to. I built the Riveter because I needed it. So I was a corporate litigator for a decade, and then I had a few experiences that I think are common to so many women in this country.
Like what?
I had 2 children, pretty close together, about a year apart. And when I was on maternity leave with my second, I kind of talked about a promotion in my current job, and it didn't seem like the right opportunity. I was really struggling to make it all work at once with my children and in corporate America. You know, corporate America is very much built by and for men. And so I, like many women, decided instead of opting out, I would opt up and to start a business. But when I looked around to talk to women entrepreneurs and women who had done this before, I couldn't find any sort of a platform. And that's where the idea for the Riveter came from.
So how does the Riveter work, and how is it different from WeWork, which, you know, I didn't realize until I started doing more research on you how fratty WeWork can be.
It certainly can be. I mean, when you look at the future of work is changing so quickly with technology. We know that 60 million Americans will be working remotely by 2020. But today, the future of work is still very much defined by men, just like the past was. The leaders in the industry like WeWork were all founded by men, they're run by men, and even their corporate boards are all men. At the Riveter, we are female forward. We are built out to support women who are growing businesses, from venture scale companies to the woman who's building a solo practice, returning back to work from taking off time with her kids. We have offsite childcare partnerships and amenities that really are built for women.
Now, there are other she-working startups out there. Some of them actually don't allow men to work there. You do.
We do.
Why?
So, at the Riveter, we take the approach that we want to change the world for women. And to do that, we think that necessarily involves all genders in the conversation. In so many ways, men still meter the oxygen. Like if you look at venture capital funding, for example, men are about 89% of venture capital investors. So we need them to be a part of this conversation. And from a practical perspective, we have so many exciting startups in our spaces that are founded by women, like Armoire and Poppy, but they also have men on their teams, as do we at the Riveter. At the same time, I think the spaces that are women only are incredible, and they're doing something really powerful in the market.
Now, I know when you were a lawyer, you had some bad experiences as a woman in the legal field. You're coming into tech where women account for 7% of investors and women-led companies get just 2% of funding. Which industry is worse for women?
You know, I think the meta point is that we live in a world where corporate America was built decades and decades ago, when women weren't in positions of leadership and mostly not even in the workplace. And I think today we've inherited so much of what was built then, from setting the office temperature to that for a man, to really men kind of leading up the C-suite.
But tech is new.
Tech is new, but we can't upend everything in one day. Right. What we can do is work together, men, women, all genders, to say, how do we move this forward? And there are really exciting initiatives like All Raise, with women venture capital investors banding together to mentor female founders and help move that forward. And hopefully male investors will get involved in that conversation too.
One of the biggest expenses when it comes to co-working space startups is real estate.
Yep.
Real estate is expensive now. What are you doing about that?
With real estate, I mean, in the early stages of a startup that's very capital intensive like real estate, we look for really opportunistic ideas. We go into spaces we can find where we don't have to do much of a build out, where we can come up with creative solutions. We use a lease model like many companies started out with, so that's one of the solutions that we're using.
Now, Amazon's obviously one of the biggest employers in Seattle. Now they're going elsewhere. I'm curious, what's happening in the Seattle tech scene? How is that shaking up the talent pool, you know, among the people that you see?
The Seattle tech scene is incredible. I mean, Seattle is still...
But Amazon's leaving.
Amazon is not leaving. Amazon is just adding another headquarters to its portfolio, which is really exciting. I mean,
but isn't it not good for the city of Seattle for Amazon to leave?
I don't think Amazon's leaving. I think Amazon is just saying we need a second home because we're so big. But
to not expand in Seattle.
But the other piece is there are so many other founders who are building incredible companies, including women. There are over 100 women in Seattle who have started companies that are venture scale. And that's what's really exciting about looking toward tomorrow.
So, you know, what's next for the Riveter? You know, you're small now. There's big competition out there. You know, how do you take on a multi-billion-dollar giant? I think we take on the multi-billion-dollar giant because women need to. There are only 29 female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and we need about 471 more. All right, doing math live on the air. That is brave. Amy Nelson, co-founder of the Riveter, thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily.
For joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.